Injury survivors are being left stuck in nursing homes and hospitals without access to vital rehabilitation services. That's according to the national charity Acquired Brain Injury Ireland, who are calling on the government to increase investment in rehabilitation. We're joined this morning by brain injury survivor Niamh Cahill, who'll be marching to the Dáil about this today, as well as Communications Manager at Acquired Brain Injury Ireland, Caroline Cullen. Good morning to you both. Such an incredible story, Niamh, that you have to tell. And it all started for you when you were only 19 with something as innocuous as a leg jerk.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened to you.
Simple leg jerk, and it kind of came and went, and then I had my first seizure that evening. So that was the kind of start of my journey into hospital, and I was kind of in and out of hospital for a while before anyone knew how serious it was. Maybe like kind of the thoughts were it could be just epilepsy, not just epilepsy, but and then just things started to get worse. You know, my speech started to go. I was very agitated. I was like, there was a baby monitor in my room because I was like just not sleeping at night. I just couldn't really function in the world.
So you were having these repeated seizures, and it was chipping away at you with every seizure.
Yeah, well, like every seizure, you're kind of at risk of losing another part of yourself. And by the time I got to Beaumont, I went to status epilepticus, so they couldn't actually stop the seizures.
That's what that means, is that they're uncontrollable?
Yeah, uncontrollable. So that's when they decided to put me in a medically induced coma. Yeah. So it bought me time, I guess.
Wow.
While they kind of tried to figure out what was going on with me.
So this just gives your brain a rest, basically.
Yeah, I think so. It can be a good kind of it can kind of win time for doctors, I suppose, in some cases.
When a diagnosis came, you had an extremely rare condition.
Yeah. So I think I was in around the first 200 people to be diagnosed in the world, and maybe the fourth in Ireland. So I got a diagnosis of anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis. So it's a mouthful, and it's also an autoimmune triggered encephalitis. So I would have been tested for encephalitis the whole way through, meningitis, loads of different neurological conditions. But the reason they never found it was because they didn't know what they were looking for. They'd never come across it before.
So what was going on in your brain then?
My blood attacked my brain.
God.
Yeah. So my main kind of point of care would be neurology, and immunology would be a big part of my care team as well, just to make sure my immune system is controlled and does what it's supposed to do, rather than not liking my brain.
Yeah. Once you had the diagnosis and they were treating you, what impact had it left on you?
Well, I got my diagnosis 2 days after I left my rehabilitation stay in the rehabilitation hospital in Dún Laoghaire. So I'd actually been treated blindly and had been through my rehab when we got the phone call with the diagnosis. My speech, when I went to Dún Laoghaire, I had no vocabulary. I was a 19-year-old with maybe the vocab of a 4-year-old. I also had no concept of how sick I was. There'd been huge swelling on my hippocampus of my brain, so wasn't even really, I was kind of naive to it. I mean, I was struggling, but like I didn't really realise how much had been taken away from me. I couldn't make decisions. I was very agitated.
You were having hallucinations as well.
Oh yeah, like so anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis has like a psychotic element. And for a lot of people, they actually end up in psychiatric hospitals before anyone knows that it's a neurological condition. So yeah, the hallucinations were probably one of the toughest part for my family. Like I suppose you could say I probably was misbehaving a bit in Beaumont because of the hallucinations.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so...
Niamh, it's incredible speaking to you now, knowing what I know about you now. This is unbelievable, and this is the difference that rehab makes, because there's nearly 20,000 people living with an acquired brain injury.
Well, that's it. Nobody thinks about that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there's 19,000 brain injuries happening in Ireland every year.
And what is the cause of them typically?
Yeah, so they're from things like stroke, which I suppose a lot of people don't realise is an acquired brain injury, and then things like road traffic accidents, falls. So it can be as simple as, you know, we had a lady who was putting out her wheelie bin on an icy day and she fell and hit her head, and then she had a brain injury. But the point is that there's not enough resourcing for community rehabilitation in this country. It's an enormous gap. So really out there right now, for people like Niamh who are coming through where they're in hospital, then what happens when they leave hospital? You know, people need to get the intensive rehabilitation in the beginning, and then gradually, hopefully, you know, they'll make progress, and gradually actually need less and less rehabilitation to get more, to get back to living an independent life. But there's a huge gap there, and it's a lottery right now as to whether brain injury survivors will even get the services they need.
Because right now, is it only the rehabilitation hospital in Dún Laoghaire that basically offers the services?
Well, right now, in terms of if you are living outside of Dublin, there are no specialist rehabilitation beds for you. So yes,
people are ending up in nursing homes. They're ending up taking up the space that a patient would need for an acute bed.
That's it. I mean, the journey that some people are having is really, really terrible. And it's devastating families. So you could have that. You have your brain injury. You find yourself in hospital. You come through, really serious things like Niamh has described. Medically induced comas and so on. And then after that, you need to be discharged to get the intensive rehabilitation to move on with your life. And you may not get a place in the National Rehabilitation Hospital, or you may, and then you can stay there for maybe a max of up to 3 months, and then what happens? And what's happening is that they don't have the funding right now there for the community rehabilitation places, so you may find yourself in a nursing home. You might be in your 20s, 30s or 40s, and you're placed in a place with older people, but you're not getting anything to help you actually with your rebuilding of your life. So so rehabilitation, we empower people in Acquired Brain Injury Ireland to actually do things for themselves. You're trying to help them deal with the deficits of a brain injury, so overcome things like memory problems, learn to manage the fatigue. Their brain is working twice as hard as before their injury. There's all sorts of different deficits that you can have.
Well, if Niamh says she used to have the vocabulary of a 4-year-old, and now, I mean, you got a 2-1 from Maynooth. You're in your second masters. This is the difference. It can turn your life around again. So what are you hoping to achieve today? You have a big day planned.
So we have a big day. We are going in to talk to politicians to really flag the gaps that are there in the system, because it's not right that brain injury survivors should find themselves in a nursing home, or worse, sent back to hospital where they began, where they don't need to be, and they're taken up in acute bed.
I love your tagline, don't save us, then leave us.
It's
so, we're saving lives, but then they're left.
Then they're left without rehabilitation, and it is criminal. It's really wrong. And so, but the great thing is, so 8 years ago, there is a national neuro rehabilitation strategy. It's there in black and white, and then as recently as this year, there's an implementation framework announced. The problem is there's still no action, there's still no funding. So that's what we're going in to call for. We want funding for a regional neuro rehabilitation centre. Acquired Brain Injury Ireland is here. We're the experts. We know the rehabilitation works. We have the proof. We have the people getting back to their lives, fully supported. We just need the funding.
How did Brain Injury Ireland help you?
So I would have got in touch with Acquired Brain Injury Ireland after my time in Dún Laoghaire, and at that time I was trying to transition back into college. My main issues at the time were my confidence had taken a huge knock. When you have a brain injury, everything you are not anymore, until you start to rebuild those bricks again. So Acquired Brain Injury Ireland really, really helped me with my confidence and just like study skills and stuff like that for getting back to college, organising myself, simple things like that.
You're amazing. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I hope today goes phenomenally well for you, because you absolutely deserve it. Lovely to meet you, Caroline.
Thank
you so much. Now, come this morning, Dr. Niamh Cahill will be here to chat about how best to speak to your